We'd sneak up on a house full of bad guys and enter as quietly as we could, foregoing explosives for the silent removal of windows, picking of locks, or whatever other clever ways we could think of that would make minimal noise. When we found a sleeping enemy, we'd stand over him and slowly remove his blanket. Then we'd run a finger lightly down his chest to check for a vest. Some guys liked to sleep in them. If the bad guy had a vest on, it was time to shoot before he had a chance to clack himself off. If he didn't have a vest, it was time to wake him up. This was the fun part. What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another video. In today's video, we're going to be going over an unbelievable SEAL Team 6 raid on an Al-Qaeda compound. As we go over all the details of this raid, I'll have a bunch of photos in the background as well as some SEAL Team 6 combat footage for you guys to enjoy. We're going to be going over the first-hand account of this raid from the book The Operator, written by a legendary former Naval Special Warfare Development Group operator, Rob O'Neill, also known as the man who killed bin Laden. I'll have a link down in the top of the description where you guys can buy his book, The Operator. If you have not read this book, what are you doing with your life? Go buy this book immediately. If you already own this book, go buy it again and give it to a friend. This book is an absolute masterpiece and you have got to read it. With all that out of the way, let's get into this story. We were handed targets that required us to hit 3 separate adjacent houses simultaneously, with 3 of our teams working together. This was a time-sensitive target. The guys we wanted were there at the moment, but might not be in just a few hours. We could potentially take out an entire cell with one operation if we acted fast. The fastest way was to land on the X, which left me more than a little concerned. These houses outside Fallujah were filled with Al-Qaeda. They'd definitely hear us and be ready at the door. So I needed to come up with a system that would minimize my time at the door. So I built a 7-foot strip of C6 plastic explosive that could be rolled out like a fruit roll-up, only less delicious. The material opposite the explosive is extremely sticky. So as the bomb unrolled down the door, it would stick to it. That could be done in an instant. I saved even more time by pre-attaching the blasting cap to the explosive. Don't try this at home. It's definitely a risk to run around with a charge already capped in, but getting shot is no good either, so I took the risk. Now all I had to do once the bomb was placed was attach the cap to a 20-foot reel of shock tube, a kind of fuse that rolled out from a wheel like fishing line. As we prepared to launch, I stowed my gear in 2 M60 pouches that I rigged on my right hip. A few hours after the sun went down, we took off in 3 Black Hawks. The other shooters with me were Cole, Delicious, and Mac. I could see our target now, and I traced the route I'd take to the front door of Building 1-1, the primary target. My gun was up, night vision down, invisible laser on. I was lighting up the front door for myself so that I could take a shot if a head and gun popped out. Nothing. We hit the deck and I sprinted to the door. I had 3 of my guys, Cole, Delicious, and Mac, with me for security. Delicious and Mac would stand back and hold the corners while Cole came up with me to cover the crack, meaning hold his gun on the part of the door that might pop open while I placed the charge. We got to the door, which was a standard heavy wooden door with a knob on the left. That meant the hinges were inside on the right. I was going to put the charge on the hinge side. I was attaching 7 feet of C6. It was gonna open. I made sure to stand off to the right side as I placed the charge. I could sense Cole beside and behind me with his gun reassuringly fixed on the crack. If the bad guys had shot through the door in the 3 seconds it took me to unroll the sticky strip, the bullets might have missed by a few inches. Might have missed. I was maximizing my chances, but it was still no sure thing. As I bolted away, unrolling the shock tube as I went, Cole was right behind me. We ran about 25 feet from the door, and I clacked it off. A charge like this is big and loud, even at a safe distance. So loud that a lot of guys suffer from cumulative traumatic brain injury later in life. It's a load-pushing charge that destroys everything in front of it. This was no exception. The guys who'd come in on the other helicopters hadn't even set off their charges yet, so I guess my new system had worked. Now there was a ragged hole where the door had been. We charged into the house. I was the number 2 man right behind Delicious. The room opened up into a small living room with another room off to the left and a stairwell to the right. Straight ahead was an open door to a kitchen. Delicious went right and I went left. I cleared my corner first, and as I swept my weapon back to the right, I saw a body crumpled on the floor beside an AK-47. My eye followed the wide blood trail that led from the body up the wall to a red impact smear near the ceiling. Clearly, the insurgent had been standing at the door about to fire when my 7-foot-long charge beat him to the punch. As I looked more closely at the very dead body, a cold shock ran through me. The insurgent was no him. It was a woman. A woman waiting to kill me with an AK-47. She was an enemy combatant for sure, but she was also a woman. I remember thinking, I hope God forgives me. I would think of this many times and never feel completely right about it, but I had no time then to indulge in guilt. Delicious had cleared his room and returned. Together we moved past the woman's body and through the door to the kitchen. The kitchen was clear, but there was another door at the far end leading to a bedroom. Since the door opened into the corner of the room, I could pie it, which meant standing just outside the door and sweeping the room slice by slice. When I was 50% through, my invisible laser exposed another insurgent pointing an AK-47 toward the entrance, waiting for us to come in so he could unload his weapon. Behind him were 3 small children. Unfortunately for him, I could see in the dark and he couldn't. I was able to take 2 good headshots and he went down. I finished my clearance to the best of my ability and then we entered. The 3 children were fine, but frightened, obviously. That was the last room on the floor and the rest of the team had finished clearing the second story. Now the house was clear. 2 insurgents had been killed in action and 3 children were physically okay. We could hear gunfire at some distance outside. The 2 other teams were getting it on. While my guys searched the house for weapons, explosives, and intelligence, I took the 3 kids into the kitchen and brought in my interpreter. This was difficult. The kids were standing there looking up at us, and they were the ages of my kids and my buddies' kids. It really sucks that children are involved in this, and there are always kids in these houses. Always. The children told us that most of the folks nearby were family, but that there were strangers in town. This was their father's house, and that was the man I'd shot in the bedroom. They'd been sleeping in there when the helicopters woke them up. Their father had sent his wife, their mother, to the door with an AK-47 to martyr herself and possibly take one of us with her. Now these kids were orphans. Didn't even know at this point that their father was dead. They'd only heard 2 suppressed shots, which might not sound like gunfire to an innocent ear. Nor did they know that their mother had been blown up at the front door. But I did. I asked them where their nearest family was. They said their aunt lived in a house across the small field out the back door. I told the kids to grab their shoes. I shouldered my gun so I wouldn't scare them, and I walked them about 30 meters to the aunt's house. Here I was in the middle of a gunfight, and I actually rang the doorbell. It was probably the single most reckless thing I'd ever done, but it was a very terrible feeling to know that I'd killed these children's parents, essentially right in front of them. I wanted to make sure the kids were taken care of and not any more frightened than they already were. That had nothing to do with any of this, and after all, we were the good guys. The ability to save the lives of non-combatants was one of the most important skills of SEAL Team 6. When intel pinpoints a terrorist safe house, the leadership can just order up a guided bomb and blow the place apart. Since, as I've said, you can always multiply the number of fighters in a safe house by wives, kids, and cousins, the collateral damage in a strike like that can be something like 20 plus to 1. If you drop a payload on a house, you risk killing 20 innocent people for every 1 terrorist. By contrast, we were precise enough to hit our target without killing innocent people. That's why we were given latitude, at least back then. We'd proven we could do exactly what the command needed. I put the kids in front of the door and backed into the shadows. A woman came to the door and spoke for a second before bringing them in. They crossed the threshold, then, and I'll never forget this, they turned and waved. When I got back to the original target, the gunfight was ongoing all around us. My team had found AK-47s, grenades, and some homemade explosives. We were in the heart of Al-Qaeda country, and this was proof of who lived here. We walked in a patrol order through the compound to the secondary target. The team leader met us at the main entrance and gave us the dump on what was happening. They'd cleared the building, killed 2 of the enemy, and arrested 2 more, who were currently being interrogated by the tactical questioning team. The remainder of his team was searching all the nooks and crannies where Al-Qaeda liked to hide weapons and intelligence. As Street was talking, he was interrupted. We heard the unmistakable blat of an automatic weapon. 2 rooms away from us, part of the search team had uncovered a fighting-age male in a hiding hole in the wall. He was armed and attempted, but failed, to get some shots off when the team moved the false wall he was standing behind. The first BAP was the last thing he heard. We rolled up all of the men and left all of the women and children behind. We told the women not to leave their houses until the sun was up. We explained that our aircraft would remain in the area and we didn't want them to be mistaken for reinforcements. That could be bad. In all, that night we killed 7 Al-Qaeda fighters and took 9 more off the battlefield. It wasn't even an unusually eventful evening. We were getting in fights every single night, and it got to the point that if we only killed 5 Al-Qaeda, we considered it a slow night. We remained in our humble abode in Ramadi for about 10 days as we honed our tactics and technique. We became so good at entering targets silently that we started playing a game we called Counting Coup in honor of Native American warriors of the past. To demonstrate their courage and stealth, Native Americans would creep up to their sleeping enemy and touch him, even taking items off his person without waking him up. So we started doing that too. We'd sneak up on a house full of bad guys and enter as quietly as we could, foregoing explosives for the silent removal of windows, picking of locks, or whatever other clever ways we could think of that would make minimal noise. When we found a sleeping enemy, we'd stand over him and slowly remove his blanket. Then we'd run a finger lightly down his chest to check for a vest. Some guys liked to sleep in them. If the bad guy had a vest on, it was time to shoot before he had a chance to clack himself off. If he didn't have a vest, it was time to wake him up. This was the fun part. I'd put one finger over his lips and quietly whisper, "Shh." It was always interesting to see how these feared enemies of America, these holy warriors, reacted. Without exception, they'd all turn into complete cowards and cried like little school children who just crapped their pants on the playground. And usually, they did crap their pants. But who could blame them? They'd awoken to their worst nightmare, American justice. On these visits, we'd leave our interpreters outside until the houses were clear. It was too dangerous to bring them in with us. I remember talking with intelligence folks and analysts about this. They questioned how we could communicate with our captives. "You don't speak Arabic," they'd say. "Yeah," I'd respond, "but everyone speaks gun." And with that, guys, that's going to be the end of the video. Thank you so much for checking out. I hope you enjoyed it. Like I said, I will have the link to buy this book, The Operator, down in the description below. Go buy the heck out of this book. It is an absolute masterpiece. You will love it. But I hope you guys will have a fantastic day. Thank you so much for checking the video out, and I will see you guys in the next one.